Hello, my name is Yolanda Burgess, and I am from Zimbabwe, Africa. My husband and I, we live and work in Zimbabwe, and I have a couple of questions from several students in your class, and I am going to go ahead and ask the question and then do my best to answer it. So I'm going to say the name of the person who asked the question, but I'm really sorry if I am butchering the pronunciation of your name. I'm going to do my best and hopefully get that right. So the first question is from Callan, and Callan says, what are schools in Zimbabwe like? So we have school starts with ECD-A, which is the equivalent to kindergarten. So you have ECD-A and ECD-B, which is before first grade, and they are a requirement before you can actually go to first grade. Then you have elementary school, which we call junior school, and junior school is both elementary and middle school, and it goes from first through seventh grade. And then after seventh grade, we go to high school, and high school is Form 1 to Form 4. That's 4 years of high school. When you are 13, that's when you go to high school. And you can graduate in Form 4 after 4 years. But the difference is that even though you can graduate after 4 years, most people, if they have the ability, they continue to do 2 more years of high school called Upper 6. So Form 5 and Form 6, where they specialize in 3 subjects. And even though that is still just considered high school in Zimbabwe, it is a requirement to have Upper 6 to do A levels before you can go to any university in the continent of Africa. So in the US, I would say it's those 2 years, even though it's considered high school, would be the equivalent of 1 year of college. So a couple things up in the corner over here, I'm going to show you some pictures throughout when I'm speaking, and you'll see some pictures of some kids in school. So there are school uniforms, as you'll be able to see. Both girls and boys at all schools wear a school uniform. It's a requirement. Every school obviously has a different uniform dependent on their colors. And you have a summer uniform and a winter uniform. And then you also have a sports uniform. There are 3 types of school here in Zimbabwe. We have government schools, which are the majority of schools, and government schools are the same as public schools. Then we have private but lower income schools. They would be similar to charter schools. And then we have private that are higher income schools. And so boarding schools are very normal, and they are predominantly in private schools in Zimbabwe. So school is not free in Zimbabwe. You have to pay money. And so if you are low income and you go to a government school, school fees could be really cheap, really affordable, but the people who send their kids there are low income people, so they make less than $2 a day. So school fees can seem almost impossible to pay, along with all the other fees like school uniforms and books and sports and all the other requirements. So since COVID, basically all the kids in public schools end up going for extra lessons. And the teachers who teach the classes, they continue the lesson in extra lessons. So if your parent is unable to pay for extra lessons, you end up losing out on your education, because the teacher does not pick up the next day in school. They do not pick up the lesson where they ended it. They pick up where they left off in extra lessons. So very different and very difficult for a lot of people. So as you can see, really great, the uniforms, wearing ties, even for the little kids that are in ECD A and B, as well as in first grade. And of course, a big brim hat for the hot heat in the country of Zimbabwe is a necessity. So the second question is from Jackson, and Jackson asks, what sports are popular in Zimbabwe? So we have multiple sports. I would say soccer is the most popular on the continent of Africa, not just in the country of Zimbabwe. But we have other sports that are pretty popular too, things like rugby, which is similar to American football, but doesn't have the helmets and the level of padding included. And then there's cricket, and there's really not really anything similar to that. I mean, it's not really like baseball. You do use a bat, but you have wickets, which means when you hit a ball, you just run back and forth to get points. And a cricket game could go on for several days, like a professional game, but it is a sport that's learned in school. And then, of course, running. So you can get in private schools. There are a lot of other sporting opportunities. Of course, athletics, swimming, if they have pools, tennis, all those things are pretty common. Field hockey. Of course, we don't have things like ice hockey and other such sports. And although there is basketball for girls, it's usually netball that's more common, and volleyball in high school. But the most common sport, especially in schools, is going to be sports like soccer and running, because you don't need a lot of resources. You don't need a lot of different specialized equipment. And so those are going to be your most common things that you do. So I wanted to kind of talking about sports. Soccer is very common among kids, but sometimes you can't have a soccer ball. Even though that might seem like really affordable and cheap to you, those things are even rare in Zimbabwe. So what the kids do is they make their own soccer balls, and they do that by just using a literal grocery bag. So I'll give you an example. This is just a Target grocery bag, and they take this plastic bag and they scrunch it up into a ball, and then they get rubber bands. Sometimes they even use the inner of a bicycle tire, and they cut that up to get these rubber pieces, and then they tie the rubber bands around these bags, and they keep getting more and more bags that they keep wrapping around into a tight ball. And again, they keep tying on more rubber bands, and they continue this process over and over and over again until they have a soccer ball sized ball. And this is what they will use as their soccer ball. So pretty ingenious and really smart to just be able to use what they have available to them. So the third question is from Jamie, and Jamie asks, what kind of technology do you have there? So we have things like Wi-Fi and internet. We have satellite dishes, and we have smartphones and computers and laptops. All those types of things exist in Zimbabwe. I mean, even in a rural area where people live in mud huts, you will find a satellite dish on a mud hut, literally. And you will find a person having a phone. Now, it won't necessarily be a smartphone. In the rural setting, they are generally very basic flip phones that they would use. And many of you won't even know what a flip phone is, but it means that it doesn't have access to internet on the phone. It's really just used for calling and texting. And then, the thing about the technology in Zimbabwe as far as the internet is concerned is that even though we do have access to internet, it is extremely slow. For example, for myself and my husband Andrew, our internet can be 1.5 megabytes per second, our speed. So you might not know what that means, but I'll explain it to you in the sense that in the United States, we were checking online just this past week how fast the internet was in the house that we're in right now, and it was 1,000 megabytes per second, right? That means that the internet here in the US, in some places, can be 1,000 times faster, okay? So even if you don't know what megabytes is and how to, what the speed is of internet, just understand that how quickly it is for you to get on Google or to open up a picture, maybe in Snapchat or whatever app you're using, that will take 1,000 times longer to do in Zimbabwe, right? So the fourth question is from Finnegan and Dylan. They ask, what kind of food do you eat, and or what is popular to eat? And the second part of that question is, what are some native foods? So I'll start off with what the staple diet is. The staple diet, staple means the thing that people eat the most or that people eat every single day. For example, in Asia, the staple diet would be rice. So in Zimbabwe, the staple diet is sadza. And sadza is made out of cornmeal that's boiled up in water. It's often cooked over an open fire. I'm going to have some pictures up here of a woman actually cooking over an open fire, and I'll have some pictures of some kids that are eating sadza, as well as some beans, which is a very common form of protein. So usually with sadza, you have a type of greens that's cooked up with tomatoes and onions. That's a very common side. And then for protein, they might have the cheapest form would be beans. Sugar beans is the type of beans we have in Zimbabwe, and then eggs. And then from there, you have different types of meat, chicken, beef, and other such things. But they eat all parts of the animal. So chicken feet are very common to eat in Zimbabwe. Flying ants are very common to eat. And worms, the kind that you find on leaves, not fishing worms, those are common to eat. So lots of different sources of protein that happen to be more affordable depending on how much money you have. Now for myself and Andrew, you'd be surprised to find out that we actually eat a lot of common foods that you might find here in the US. We enjoy a lot of Asian cuisine, so I cook a lot of Thai and curries, Indian food. We enjoy rice and pastas, so Italian cuisine and pizzas and things like that. It's harder to cook Mexican, so but my husband loves that. So when I make tacos, I have to make the tortillas from scratch. I need to make my refried beans from scratch. I need to make my own taco seasoning. I can't just buy it in the store in a packet. I have to make my own ranch dressing from scratch. So things that are very easily accessible in the US are not so easy in Zimbabwe. And so a lot of things need to be made from scratch. But I can purchase a lot of the ingredients from South Africa, which is a bordering country. So it's still complicated because we go to a different country to do a lot of our shopping because of the limitations to find those items in Zimbabwe. Now, even when you can find stuff in Zimbabwe in specialty stores, it can be extremely expensive. And it's not uncommon to purchase most of your things on the side of the road. And things like eggs, we purchase on the side of the road. A lot of different types of vegetables and fruit, we purchase on the side of the road. Things that are really expensive to get in Zimbabwe are things like cheese. Cheese is extremely expensive. And of course, certain meats are very expensive also. And if you're going to find any specialty item like, say, soy sauce or sriracha or anything like that, or like taco seasoning, those things are almost impossible to come by. All right. The fifth question is asked by Sally. And Sally says, what are pros and cons to living in Zimbabwe? So, of course, the pros would be just a slower pace of living and just the emphasis on relationships and community and beautiful landscapes. I think I'm going to go ahead and post a picture of Victoria Falls, which is one of the 7 natural wonders in Zimbabwe. It's just a beautiful place. And then, of course, we get to see wildlife. I'll talk a little bit more about that with a later question. But also foods. I get to enjoy a lot of different types of tropical fruits like lychees or guavas or granadillas. Those are things that grow locally, and mangoes, huge avocados, very easily accessible in Zimbabwe. And so really, really, that is a big pro. The cons of living in Zimbabwe are things like slow internet, like I already mentioned, as well as daily power cuts. So the electricity can be off anywhere from 18 to 22 hours every single day in Zimbabwe. So that makes it extremely difficult. So unless you have a backup source like a generator, which is expensive because you have to have fuel, or solar, which is extremely expensive to put in, you generally don't have access to electricity a lot of the time. So we are very blessed because in the last 3 years, we have been able to have solar put in, which allows us to have electrical appliances and lights and so forth. There's a lack of clean drinking water. In fact, in the capital city, when you open taps, faucets, you will find the water coming out black, literally black, not just brown or discolored, but black. And it smells really bad. It's not really good for drinking. So water is really difficult, good, clean drinking water. Most everybody purchases water, bottled water. We are blessed because we have a well, so we have access to clean drinking water. And then sometimes the government will just switch the water off, just like they do with the electricity, because they don't have the chemicals to keep up with providing clean drinking water to the people. So in some locations, people can go 3 weeks without having any access to water coming through their taps in their homes. So they need to go down to the river, and I'll put some pictures up of people going down to the river to be able to actually get some water. So that is definitely a con. Other things are things like bad roads. You can take a look at that, and just how terrible they are with potholes, and then lots of things that are expensive in the shops, and then lower grade produce. You know, sometimes when we are able to find produce in the shops, it's moldy, it's not good quality, it's already going bad. And then just you are surrounded by a lot of poverty, a lot of poor people, and not just adults, but like a lot of street kids that you see, people who are hungry and starving. And then the last con, I would say, not being close to family, not being close to Andrew's family, who are all in the United States, and then majority of my family that live outside of the country of Zimbabwe. So those are a lot of the cons of living there. So the next question is from Logan. And Logan asks, what are some animals that you encounter around where you live? Any that would be scary or deadly? Yes, there are definitely lots of deadly animals. In our yard alone, we have an issue with snakes. So things like black mambas or cobras, a variety of different snakes that are venomous and bad and dangerous. And, a black mamba is one of the most dangerous snakes in the world. I'm going to put a picture up here of taken by my cousin at his home. And it is a mamba that's 2.6 meters. So you'll have to ask your teacher about what that is in feet. But 2.6 meters is the length of this black mamba. And a black mamba, if it bites you, you have about 30 minutes to live if you don't get the anti-venom. And there is no anti-venom in the entire country of Zimbabwe. So it is a death sentence. So definitely dangerous animals. We have a variety of other types of animals. You know, in our yard, we have lots of geckos and lizards and lots of different types of birds, and of course ants and things like that, insects, lots of spiders in our home. Those things are generally not dangerous. Mosquitoes, flies, those are a nuisance. Mosquitoes can be dangerous because you can get an illness called malaria, which could be very, very bad. But now you're probably thinking about bigger animals. And so there is a variety of wildlife. And I'm going to show you some pictures of some of the animals that I've taken photos of. So things like lions or elephants, giraffes, zebras, lots of different types of antelope, baboons, warthogs, hippos, just to name a few of the types of animals. And you'd be surprised to know that hippos are in fact the most dangerous animal in Africa, not just a lion. A lot of people think a lion is the most dangerous, but in the continent of Africa, hippos kill more people than any other wild animal. And something really interesting about a zebra is that its stripes are extremely unique. I'm sure you know that every single person's fingerprint is unique. Every single one of us has a unique fingerprint to ourselves. There's no other one like it. Well, zebras are the same. Every zebra has its own unique stripes. And so the way that a baby zebra finds its mother, or the way that a mother finds its baby zebra in a whole herd of zebras, is by the stripe pattern because it's different. So that's something really interesting. Okay, so I posted a bunch of pictures up here of the different animals. Of course, we have things like crocodiles, hyenas, cheetahs, all kinds of different things. We have endangered species like rhinos. We have both the black and white rhino in Zimbabwe. All right, next question is this Kaylee or Kalia? I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but the next question is from Kalia, possibly. And they ask, what kind of clothing is popular and what do people wear there? So you'd be surprised to know that most people in Zimbabwe wear Western attire, like shorts and t-shirts and slacks and dresses and skirts, very common. And this is primarily because there are these huge clothes bales that are sent from Western countries to the continent of Africa. And then on the side of the road, I told you that you could buy eggs, you can buy produce, you could also buy clothes. Just they piled up. They're almost like thrift stores out in the open air. You can purchase really affordable secondhand, sometimes clothes that even have tags on it, but it all comes from the US or England or other such countries. And so you can't always tell somebody's economic standard, like how wealthy they are or how low income, dependent on what they are wearing. Because somebody might be wearing a name brand item, but they purchased it for just a couple of dollars. So, Western attire is very common. What is more specific is that older women generally will wear dresses and skirts. They won't wear slacks or shorts. Dresses that cover your knees, because knees are considered an attractive thing in Zimbabwe. So you try to keep your knees covered as a woman. And generally women will try to keep their shoulders covered also. In some areas, you also have women covering their heads, and that's called a doek. I'm going to give a sample of that on here. This woman is wearing a matching dress and head scarf, which is called a doek. And this type of fabric is called Ankara. And Ankara is just a brightly colored African fabric that has a lot of African motifs. Sometimes they are circles, drums, squares, different spots or dots to make different types of designs and so forth. So this is a very common type of attire that women and even men will wear, even in Zimbabwe and overall on the continent of Africa. Something that is common is to wear, for women, is to wear a Zambian. And a Zambian is just a piece of fabric that they use as a wrap that they would wear around their waist over the clothes they are wearing. Whether they're wearing dress or some other form of attire, they would still wear a Zambian. And that's because they are used to sitting outside or sitting on areas that aren't clean and not necessarily chairs or indoors. So in order to protect their clothes, and because there isn't access to lots of water, so they need to wear items more than once, they use this Zambian to sit on to protect their clothing, or they use it to carry their babies on their back, or they use it to wrap and curl and put on their head when they're carrying items. So that is a big part of the attire for sure. You'll find that men dress a lot more formally, and even in the hot climates, they might wear a suit to, like, say, church or work and so forth. But it is becoming more common that women are wearing shorts and showing shoulders and wearing tank tops, and even men are wearing shorts, but it isn't the norm within the culture. All right, next question is from Savannah, and Savannah asks, what languages are spoken in Zimbabwe and what languages do each of you know? So you'll be surprised to know that English is in fact a national language in Zimbabwe. It is the school academic language. It is the marketplace language, which means any businesses and so forth utilize English. But there are tribal languages too. So Shona is the majority tribe in Zimbabwe, and then the minority tribe is Ndebele. And so Ndebele has some clicking sounds to it. I'm sure you've heard of a clicking sound because it's very similar to South African languages. And then Shona is the majority tribe, and it is the language that we predominantly use in the area that we live in addition to English. And so I can say a couple things to you in Shona if you would like. So I will greet you. Mangwanani, that means good morning. Or Maskati, that means good afternoon. And Tatenda, that means thank you. And so I'll introduce myself to you. Zita Rangu Ndi Yolanda. That means my name is Yolanda. So that's just a couple things so that you can kind of hear. So obviously I can speak English, and I am conversational in Shona. I don't know any Ndebele, but I am also fluent in Afrikaans, which is my mother tongue, which means it's the language that I grew up speaking in my home. Okay, we have the last two questions ready to go. The second to last question is from both, I am sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly, but I believe this is Kaylin and Isabel. And they ask, how hot does it get there? And what is the weather like? So it can get as hot as 110 degrees. In fact, it could probably get a little bit warmer than that. In the part of the country that we live in, it gets pretty hot. And but generally, I would say it's in the high 90s. The weather is not super humid. It's more of a dry heat. But of course, when it's the rainy season, it can get quite humid. There are other parts in the country that are cooler. And there are parts in the country, like where my brother lives, that because there is a huge falls there, the humidity is 100% most of the time. So that feels kind of like a sticky, hot weather, and that's very difficult to live in. And so that's difficult when you don't have AC and you aren't able to cool off. And so we utilize a lot of different things to try and keep ourselves cool. And of course, if we have access to electricity, fans is the number one thing that we use for that. Now in the winter time, the weather is still pretty warm during the daytime. Between 10 a.m. and about 4 p.m., the weather can still be in the 70s. So very comfortable, shorts and t-shirt weather. But once the sun starts going down and before it comes up in the morning, there's about a 30-degree drop, and the temperature can get as low as 40 degrees. So that might not seem that cold to you, but you need to understand we are living in a country where all the buildings are built in such a way to keep inside cool. Everything is cement or tiled floors. All exterior halls have big vents in them to let constant cold air in, even in the wintertime. People are getting up early, it's 4 in the morning, to go and get water from rivers and walk to school. And they use cold water to bathe themselves. So 40 is very cold in that situation. All right, we have gotten to the last question. And the last question is from Ella May. And Ella May asks, what is something that would shock or surprise an American about Zimbabwe? So I think one of the things that is so shocking is how poor majority of the country is. It is, even you find a lot of poverty, and it's hard for a lot of Americans to understand how people can even survive or live in that way. But you'd always also be surprised with the big cities and how advanced they are. I'm going to put a picture of the capital city, and you can kind of see skyscrapers. People are always kind of surprised by that skyscrapers exist in Zimbabwe, and that there is modern technology in businesses and in private schools and in things like that. Well, guys, thank you so much for asking all your questions. It was so fun to be able to share a little bit about my country, Zimbabwe, Africa. And, I just hope you guys have a great day and have enjoyed the pictures and all the information. So, bye-bye.